My name is Priscilla and I'm a marriage family therapist intern, and I'm really excited to be able to speak with you today about eating disorders and give you a more in-depth look about this really troubling issue that affects so many people. I have a private practice in Dana Point, as well as I see clients here in Irvine. And one of my passions, besides, working with depression, anxiety, and relationship issues, is eating disorders. That's where my heart lies. And so I created a blog for recovery and support on eating disorders. And one of the topics that I'm actually really passionate about is the men who suffer from eating disorders. I feel that it is such a silent epidemic for a lot of men who struggle. There's so much stigma associated with it. So it was really important for me to kind of educate people. So about 2 months ago, I wrote a blog post about breaking the silence about eating disorders and the men who suffer. And it was interesting and really exciting. I got a comment from this one gentleman who wrote that, if I needed any help spreading the word, that he would love to help me, that he's been in recovery from anorexia. And he posted a link with his story. And when I clicked on it, I was blown away. It was a link to the Dr. Oz show, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. He's an amazing man who does so much good, and he has a great show. And this man that I have here today that I'm going to be speaking with, his name is Bryan Bixler, and he was on the Dr. Oz show, and he told his story, and it was so inspirational and so inspiring. And so I'm really excited to introduce him to you and to help shed the light on not only men and eating disorders, but just eating disorders in general, and kind of the movement that's going on to raise not only the education, but the awareness.
Hi, my name is Leanne Marquez. I'm a marriage and family therapist intern, and I work with biofeedback and neurofeedback as an integrative approach in therapy. And what that is that it's a body scan, and it scans your body or your brain waves that gives me additional information about you. And these things could be unconscious, and that helps me with your therapy and helps you move along quicker. Also, I'm offering a free session, 20 minutes for you if you contact me. And I work with children, I work with adolescents and adults. So contact me at journeytobecomingwhole.com, or my number is 949-478-2324. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back. I am here and I'm so excited to introduce to you Bryan Bixler. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, I kind of told a little bit about how I wrote a blog post, about men who suffer from eating disorders and kind of the lack of, I think, awareness, is associated as a woman's disease, and how, statistically, 8 out of the 8 million people in the United States who do suffer from eating disorders, 10% of them are men. And I feel that there's even more out there who just don't talk about it, feel shame, and it's not even readily available for them to kind of seek treatment as much as it is for women.
Right.
So when you reached out to me and, offered, to help me in any way as far as awareness and education, and I saw your story, I was so inspired. So if you want to, I guess, talk a little bit about your story and your journey.
Okay. Well, actually, first, as you said, there is a big stigma and stereotype about eating disorders, and men don't get eating disorders.
Yeah.
So not only is it underreported, and there's probably a lot more men out there that do need help, many of them probably don't realize they have eating disorders. I know in the journey of my eating disorder, it was overlooked for many, many years because, again, I was a man.
Yeah.
So I guess the best way to start would be to kind of describe how mine developed, kind of the seeds of the eating disorder, and then how it progressed and up until I actually got help for it. So I would say it actually started, the seeds would be in high school. Mm-hmm. I was an athlete. I was one of those perfectionistic, achieving, academic, athletics, everything. It was all about achievement.
Yeah.
And kind of ironically, this was where my eating disorder began, with that perfectionism. They talk about eating disorder developing in what they call a perfect storm. It's your genetics, it's the environment you're raised in, it's the circumstances around you at the time. My parents were going through a divorce, and I kind of threw myself into my academics and my sports.
Was it a way of distracting for you as far as how it started with, like you said, throwing yourself into academics and sports?
I think it was a way of dealing with what I was going through in the family, the family dynamics. I was the virtual ping pong child, 2 weeks with mom, 2 weeks with dad. And it was kind of a bitter divorce. My parents used me as somewhat of a weapon to hurt each other in their own pain. My mom would accuse me of being my father, or my father would say I've been manipulated by my mom. And I think in a way I was trying to assert my own identity through my achievement. So this is kind of the stage where things began. I'd been a soccer player for about 15 years. And when I got to high school, I decided to go out for a new sport. And running was my first choice. So I got on the track team, and my coach introduced the idea of nutrition. And for my mindset, the kind of person I am, he said to be a good athlete, you have to eat well, fuel your body to be competitive and to win. And that's kind of when I started making the changes in how I ate. Up until that point, I never really thought about my food. I was pretty normal throughout most of my adolescent years. And the small changes started to develop over time into bigger changes. By the time I was in college, I was a vegetarian. Eventually, that developed into a vegan. I was actually studying ecology at the time, and I incorporated those ideas about eating green for the planet. So I had all these ideas around food.
But it became more restrictive.
Exactly.
As time went on.
So small changes, I describe it. Start with peanut butter and jelly. Yeah. Something as simple as that. I switched to peanut butter and honey because honey was healthier in my mind. And
then you went vegan, and then no more honey.
Right. Yeah. And I guess it's a concept of perfecting that perfectionism.
Exactly.
My intake to match what I wanted to be as far as either eating green for the planet or being a good athlete. The ideas changed around it.
Yeah.
Eventually, I had this idea of eating like a bushman, which I think they nowadays call it the paleo diet.
Oh, okay.
I should have written the book because I just made these ideas as I was going.
You were doing it before it became the new trend.
I called it the hunter-gatherer diet. It had to be natural, had to be organic. In clinical terms, that's called orthorexia.
Yes.
And again, this was a very slow process. Happened over time. The changes became more and more extreme. And I would say about graduate school, when I was about 27, is when it really kicked into being a eating disorder in a clinical sense.
Your diet was changing and obviously your lifestyle is changing, were you consciously aware of it getting to a dangerous level? Like you said, grad school, that's when it became an eating disorder. Right. Were you aware that that's the level it was at, or in your mind, were you still in that mindset about this is just my diet, this is my lifestyle,
I think I really thought it was a lifestyle. In a way, I almost felt superior because I was eating better than everybody else. I was still competing collegiate cross country, and that kind of taxing on your body combined with this kind of diet, it had an impact on my body, and I lost weight over the years. And my family noticed, and I was confronted multiple times. You've lost weight. I went to a couple doctors. He's a runner. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. That's what I've noticed. Doctors and, the lack of education, doctors themselves aren't that really aware of eating disorder symptoms and the signs and even kind of how to even acknowledge it. So
actually in a broad sense, absolutely. Yeah. And in particular with men, they don't look for that.
Yeah.
So I think mine went on for a long, long time without me really knowing. And I guess I'd like to call that denial. When I was confronted about it, I was pretty adamant that I was okay. And I was. I I was still excelling. I was still competing. And like I said, until the years where I started to eat things that didn't make any sense anymore, that's when I think I started to realize that this was something more than my choices.
So like you were saying, you were functioning, you were able to do your still daily activities and keep up your level of academics. So that for you wasn't a sign that it still was a problem. But when you said that you started to eat funny, what do you mean by that?
Well, for so many years, I had a reason for everything I did. I minored in nutrition, so it was all about the biochemistry, what was good for me, what was functional. If it didn't meet a function in your body, I wouldn't eat it. But at some point, I started eating things with no calories. I think my primary choice was popcorn, air popped popcorn, and Jell-O. I think that was probably my diet for many, many years while I was in the eating disorder. And I do say, I was still functioning, but when I look back and look at, say, my running, I really had gone downhill. I mean, I was pretty weak, and at some point I had to stop doing those things. And at some point, amazing how denial makes you blind to those kind of things.
Well, especially, and this is the distorted body image that falls into it, is the mindset is like, you'll see yourself, but you won't see what everyone else sees. So, if you're not even in that stage of awareness and there's so much denial, someone can tell you like you look sick or, you look weak, and your mind will not even process that. And that,
right.
And the drive to kick in to protect the eating disorder comes in and says, no, I'm fine. Like, you're crazy. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're talking about.
And I think another thing about eating disorders and the personality of an eating disorder person, we're very stubborn. And that stubbornness combined with the denial, it's pretty hard to break through. So it wasn't until my family really confronted me, and I was actually forced to go to treatment for the first time to really look at what was going on. I call it emotional blackmail. It's not the best motivator to get into treatment.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready at the time. I went to a place, probably the only place in the country at the time that treated men, Rogers Memorial in Wisconsin. And I was there for 7 months. And
that's a long time given for, usually, you go to treatment. I mean, you're lucky if you get 3 months.
Yes.
So that seems
well, this was actually because my parents were paying out of pocket.
Okay.
So there were ties there as I felt that if, I think the sense was they were going to send me away and I'd come back healthy. This was an investment in their son. And that's a hard way to go into treatment.
Yeah. A lot of times, I've worked in 3 treatment centers, and the one thing that I've noticed is the difference between the people who have been forced, especially, with adolescents under the age of 18, and their parents just take them. They're like, okay, you're going to summer camp. No, actually, you're at an eating disorder home. Go get help. I mean, it's so traumatizing. And their walls are so up, the denial is so huge, and the fight is so strong that it's just very hard to break down those walls and actually help someone who doesn't or isn't ready for the help.
Absolutely. And as a result, after 7 months, I think the one thing the program did, and I kind of look at recovery as a process. It wasn't a waste of time. I was there for 7 months. Within 2 weeks, I was back into my old behaviors, restricting, not eating, over-exercising. But the one thing the program really taught me was I didn't like the way I was dishonest about my behaviors, which was a big part of the disease. I denied all the things that I was into. My family would say, have you eaten? Well, of course, yeah, I had dinner before I came, or, it just
the little lies that build up.
Right. And I was in my mind, I thought I was a very honest person. I was creating this second life.
Yeah.
So the one thing the treatment program really did for me was break down that dishonesty, and it broke through the denial. Unfortunately, it had negative consequences. My family they came away from the experience angry. We didn't actually speak for about 2 years.
What was it that they were angry about?
Again, I think they had the expectation that I go away and be fixed.
Yeah.
And I think that's a situation with a lot of people when the families want them going to treatment, they send them away. Eating disorders are family diseases. And it's a family problem that needs to be addressed. You can't just send someone away and expect them to come back and everything be okay.
Well, and it's like what you're saying, it is a family disease. And along with, getting treatment and getting help, I think it's so important for the family to get the education and the help and have support in groups of their own. And I feel that's something that's so lacking in the community is, you have in treatment centers, the family sessions, and you have a few groups here and there, but it's nothing really geared just to help the family cope and deal.
Right.
And so it kind of makes sense, that so many people I see, and even with you saying it, is like send the kid away, send the person away. They'll come back fine. But that's usually not the case.
Right. And I think also on a certain level, I don't think families can really ever understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. They want to understand. They want to, I work with families now and they want to know why. Why is this happening? How do we fix it? Dad's about fixing things. Mom wants to make it better. And the reality is they have to accept it and the fact that they're probably never going to understand. And it's a big learning process for the whole family. Yeah. For me, that was the beginning of my journey to really try to find recovery. At that point, it was my choice. It was something that I realized was a serious problem. I could go away for 7 months, think I was doing what I needed to do, be back in the real world, and wow, I brought everything home with me that I went there with. Yeah. And I couldn't change it. And that's where I entered what I call powerlessness. Mm-hmm. There's a level in this disease where most people see it as choices. Yeah. We choose to, you choose to eat this way or choose to restrict or you choose to run or whatever be a part of your eating disorder. But the reality is, and often I actually had a discussion with someone at the gym this morning who's a woman who was actually still is suffering from an eating disorder. Mm-hmm. And she described to me as, it's the only thing I can control in my life. And I said, the irony of it though, is that you're out of control because once you're in it, the disease controls you, not the other way around.
It's funny. I had a client who I saw years ago, and I will never forget. This was one of the poignant moments where she's like, "I don't know how this happened. I don't know how this started. It just started like you were saying with the seeds. This is just a diet. This is how I'm gonna look good." She's like, "But I always thought I'd have control and I'd stop when I knew when I got to where I needed to go. But now," and she's like, "It's the only thing I can control in my life. But now it's controlling me, and you lose all control." And that's, the powerlessness. I think that's when you realize, like, what you thought you had control of, you're out of control.
And I think it's maddening typically someone who develops an eating disorder, they're the high achieving perfectionistic person who has everything in control. Yeah. And to suddenly be faced with something, and I know in my own situation, most of my life up to that age 27, when I decided I want something, I went after it and I achieved it. Mm-hmm. With this, every morning I was up against something I couldn't beat.
Because it's never going to be good enough.
Well, with the eating disorder, it was I really was powerless. Yeah. It was no longer something that I was choosing to do. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was actively seeking help at that point. Yeah. And I spent the next 7 years seeking help.
And that's what's baffling to me, and for so many people who don't know, how hard it can be to really get adequate help and to get into treatment centers sometimes. If you don't have the money to pay for it, it can be so expensive. And so kind of talk about, I guess, the hard time you had to even get treatment. 7 years, that's such a long time to be fighting.
It is. As I said, I got treatment initially through my parents out of pocket. When I left that program and I no longer had interaction with my family, I got on SSI, California Disability. Mm-hmm. Through that, I was on Medi-Cal. It's bifurcated into physical and mental. And the physical symptoms, they were actually pretty good about covering. Mm-hmm. I was actually misdiagnosed multiple times with cancer. They thought I had leukemia because of the symptoms. My initial diagnosis was an autoimmune disease called pan-pituitary. Mm-hmm. Again, this is a reflection of out in the field, people don't really know what to look for in a man. Mm-hmm. So I was dealing with several medical issues while at the same time seeking help for anorexia. I appealed to my insurance, which was Medi-Cal at the time, for inpatient treatment. I was denied in 2004. They claimed I had a pre-existing, which was the original diagnosis of pan-pituitary from several years before. Mm. which was actually the eating disorder all along, which I didn't find out till about last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then for the next 4 years, I went through the process of up and down of, at some point I felt like I had a terminal disease. Mm-hmm. I was pleading for help and I wasn't getting it. I couldn't change my behaviors. I saw the end point as, most likely my death. But not only that, I think I was essentially existing at the time. Mm-hmm. My weight had dropped severely. I had multiple medical complications. I was completely isolated from everyone around me, with the exception of my sister, who really, really fought for me. Yeah. She was one of my advocate when I was really alone in the process, and it was her who initiated my, I guess, my desire to get well again. Mm-hmm. And in 2008, I started the process of reapplying for inpatient treatment through the county. Mm-hmm. Again, this was a long process. She also went to the media, and that's when my story went. I was at a point where I was over the shame of being a man and having anorexia. I was so desperate to get help. I really didn't care who knew. I mean, it was pretty obvious. Most people saw me. They either thought I had AIDS or cancer or something like that. They could tell that you were sick. Yeah. So once the process of trying to get help again started, we went to the media. I was in the LA Times. They ran a story about men and eating disorders. I was on Inside Edition. Both of these with the intention of getting me help. Mm-hmm. Nothing really came of it, but we also had the support of the media for the coverage in the media coverage for the court case that we're impending.
Did that have any impact?
Well, it was a process of delaying things, mm-hmm. and that's what they did multiple times. We had 6 doctors testify that if I didn't get help, I would die. We had a couple stories in the media, and we were still, I guess it was at that point I felt like I was really dying. Yeah. And, just to go another week or another 2 weeks was a real tough time for me. Yeah. I mean, I was in the mindset I wouldn't even check out a movie at Blockbuster or something because I thought I might not be around to turn it in the next week. That's how scared I was. So the county continually delayed the court hearings. But it was at that point that I had applied for a scholarship, and through this scholarship, I didn't actually get the scholarship, but I was contacted by the Dr. Oz show, and they offered to give me treatment in exchange for my story on national television.
It's just so baffling to me, though, that it took such a fight and so long. And, thank heavens that, the Dr. Oz show gave you that opportunity. But it's just amazing that for so many people struggling to get help that, they don't have that opportunity. It just baffles me that it would take so much just for 6 doctors to say he's going to die if he doesn't get treatment, and still they're delaying case. This just baffles me.
Well, I mean, I just kind of skimmed over the whole process.
Yeah.
But the thing is, on the morning I left, and I will never forget this moment, the morning I left for the Dr. Oz show, it was about 4:30 in the morning. I live in Laguna Beach. It was dark. And I had forgotten to get the mail the day before. I went, picked up a manila envelope about this big, opened it up, pulled it out, and it was a court decision and a big deny across the front. So, as you said, actually without the Dr. Oz show, I don't think I'd be here. Yeah. I was given the gift of unlimited treatment, and I was in a treatment center for almost a year and a half.
And I know we've talked, and I know your stance, or at least what you said was very effective about the treatment center that you were at, was that it was about abstinence. And for you, that's kind of, I know, been something we've personally talked about, is that's how you feel a lot of treatment should be. What about the abstinence part are you an advocate about, or how did that part really help you to kind of get to that level?
Well, I guess because the way I look at it now, I mean, I think it's a combination. Many people say, well, how did you do it? Because the thing about eating disorders is the attrition rate is horrible. I mean, I could count on my hand how many of my friends were in recovery. It's relapse is a big part of it.
Yes.
So I think it's a combination of where you're at as well as the quality of the treatment center.
Mm-hmm.
And I say where you're at because oftentimes, even when we're in treatment, the disease will fight back. Yeah. You engage in the sneaky behaviors. You try to get away with things. When I talk about abstinence, it's completely giving up the behaviors, whether it be running, restricting, binging or purging, whatever it may be, or even the sneakiness of the disease.
The lies, like
you
were saying.
Yeah. So I've been working in this field for about 2 years now, and I've had interaction with multiple treatment centers. And I've had some close friends go through programs, and I've kind of got the inside view. Yeah. And one person in particular has gone through 2 programs and never really obtained abstinence. The first program she was in, she was restricting the whole program. They actually had the idea of intuitive eating for an anorexic, which anorexics don't know how to eat. Yes. They have to relearn how to eat. I went in with the idea that I was a 3-year-old and I need to relearn
how to feel your body and learn how to eat. And that's, having worked in 3 treatment facilities myself, and I think this is something we both kind of are passionate about, is how much goes, I guess, unseen, how much of the sneakiness is there. I mean, I know, like you were saying, I know people, when I've worked in the treatment facilities, that would be purging or would go and find a way to purge or binge or even exercise in their rooms. And I mean, it's very hard to monitor a lot of people in a setting, but I think some places more than others kind of really, there's a difference in the quality, I think, of care, the staff, the rules, etc. Like an intuitive eating for someone who's anorexic, that just doesn't seem like it fits.
I think it's important to be able to provide that environment because regardless of where you go or where you're at, the disease is going to fight back. Yeah. I didn't trust myself. I wanted to be in an environment where I had the support I needed. In these treatment centers that I interacted with, they didn't have that safe environment. Other people were acting out. You learn the things. When you're in treatment, you learn how to get away with things. Eating disorder patients become experts at sneakiness. Yes. They learn from each other. So that's why I believe it's a combination of where the person's at as well as the support they have. Are they willing to reach out for support while they're in treatment? When they have that urge to not do something or be sneaky about something, are they willing to really let go of any possible active behavior?
It's like complete surrender.
Right.
Surrendering to the fact that, there is this thing that's bigger than you. And if you don't really relinquish all control, that's when the chances, I guess, the higher chances of relapsing or being sneaky or finding excuses can really creep in to kind of make you hold on to it.
Right.
So I know you said you've been working now with eating disorder treatment centers and different people who are suffering for over 2 years now. What have you found in doing that work and the people that you talk to that I guess they're still struggling with, or that's still what more needs to be done, I guess, in the community as well?
I think the primary thing is education that this is a serious disease. I was invited back on the Oz show on an episode based on pro-anocytes. Yes. There's a lot of websites out there that teach you how to become an anorexic.
Yeah, it's amazing how popular that they are. And so I actually watched that episode that you were on, and they had one of the guys who makes the site on there. And let's just say, I can't imagine how you thought I wanted to reach through my TV and do very things that would get me into jail, probably. But
I did notice that the staff didn't actually put us on the stage at the same time.
Probably for good reason.
I'd refer to sites as pro-cancer. We may as well call it a pro-cancer site. So the thing you just asked me was what needs to be done. Education is key. This is not a choice. It's a deadly disease. It will kill people. I like to compare it to cancer. I mean, most people don't take eating disorders seriously. They think it's about vanity, the way you look, whatever it may be, but they don't see it as a serious disease.
Yeah, and I think you see that, I've so many times I hear people, like different people, clients and patients who've said to me, you don't know how many times I've heard family or even doctors or coaches say, just eat a burger. Just why can't you just eat this or not do this? And it's so infuriating because it's a disease, and it's a sickness. And a lot of times it's not a choice to just be stuck living that life.
Well, I saw it as a personal prison.
Mm-hmm.
The way I used to describe how it developed, I had all these rules around food, and each rule would create a new bar around this box I was living in, my own little prison. And as I chose to restrict more, it became smaller and smaller to where I wasn't really living.
Mm-hmm.
I was trapped.
Yeah.
And the reality is, you just mentioned about people say, well, why don't you just go eat a burger? How about some ice cream?
Yeah.
The reality is it's not about the food either,
Yeah.
because obesity, a huge epidemic in this country, has the same underlying issues as anorexia or bulimia.
Mm-hmm.
We're on different sides of the spectrum. I had a roommate that was 450 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And we both had the same underlying issues.
Well, and that's the main thing as far as with education, and why, I'm so passionate about spreading awareness and education, because it's really not about the food. It's the component of coping, but it really is about the underlying issues. And like you said, it's the seeds. Like there's certain seeds that are planted that make the food maybe the go-to coping mechanism, but it's like any other type of addiction or like disease, like you turning to a drug, they're not going to tell you, don't go stop like doing meth or heroin. They'll know it's beyond that. And I think with eating disorders, it's that same realm where it's beyond you.
Right. And I think that's probably one of the things, when I work with people now, my primary focus is to get them the help they need, at whatever level they can get, at a minimum, a therapist and a dietitian. But there are a couple of people I worked for a couple of years. They keep trying to do it on their own. Mm-hmm. And it's really tough to stand by and watch someone, because I did it myself for about 8 years. Those 8 years I couldn't get help. I saw a therapist twice a week.
Yeah.
He would, he had all these plans about how I could, step out of it, things I could do, and it was ineffective. Mm-hmm. And I think until you actually stop the behaviors, as I said before, abstinence, you can't make any emotional progress. Mm-hmm. So my doctors, essentially, my therapist, tried to keep me from slipping backwards. It was kind of a maintenance program. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do you run into that kind of stuff with your clients? Are you working with people that are so active in their disease?
Yeah, and that's the hard part is, you try, that's why I feel like if you can get the therapy kind of in the early stages, maybe, like you said, when maybe those seeds are kind of implanted before it really develops into years or just kind of goes crazy and it takes control, then I think that therapy is effective when you can kind of just face the underlying issues and the reasons for why someone may be going down that road. But I think for certain people who've been doing it for so long and they want the help, I think just like you said, basic therapy, like it won't be enough, because you need to be in a place that will monitor your behaviors and really kind of hold you accountable 24/7, because it's so easy to, you go to therapy and maybe you're good for a few hours because you have that stuff ingrained in you. But what's to say late at night when you're triggered that you're not just going to go back to your behavior, because that's been the pattern.
Right.
So that's why, I do believe that treatment centers and everything are so important and beneficial. I just think that certain things, at least, and that's with education and awareness, need to be changed and addressed and handled differently.
And that also brings up again, I encourage people to go to treatment. I try to match them to treatment programs. But what I'm discovering is there are a lot of treatment centers out there that I can't ethically feel comfortable sending them to.
Exactly.
Because there's no standards. Seriously, an eating disorder treatment center for anorexia or bulimia based on intuitive eating makes absolutely no logical sense. Even in a clinical setting, I don't understand it. Mm-hmm. And there are things that I've seen happen that it just doesn't make sense. For a treatment center to send their clients to an AA outside meeting unattended while they walk by liquor stores.
Yes.
So I think there needs to be some kind of across the board standards that certain centers should have. Because oftentimes a person will really want the help. They'll have that hope, and then they get into a situation such as a poor treatment center, and it's such a disappointment when this is their salvation. This is what they were hoping for, and it's not what they expect.
So what message, would you give to someone who may be struggling with an eating disorder and feel helpless or hopeless like you once felt, either because they need the help and they can't get it, or they're in denial, or their family has kind of given up on them? What would you, I guess, at least want someone to know or have to
Well, I think that the thing I do most of the time when I approach someone, and again, I've been in recovery for 3 years now. I'm now living a life I never imagined possible. I'm 44. I never thought I'd see the age of 40. I honestly thought that was the end of my life. I'm now doing things I never imagined I could do again. So from a place of complete darkness with no hope at all to such a full life. I mean, I've got amazing people in my life, so many connections. I was talking to a buddy yesterday saying, 3 years ago, life has been kind of tough for the last 2 years, just life issues. But I've got such a rich life with people in it.
Yeah.
And when I look back to 3 years ago when I was in the disease, I was completely alone. So, which brings me to that. This morning I was at the gym and I ran into this woman who's trapped in that place. And the message I tried to give her was, and she said, my family doesn't understand. I'm completely alone. I just go on with my life. And I said, there's a different life out there for you. You don't have to be alone. And you can get help. You can have a rich life. So I like to use my story as a message of hope.
And, that's why I think it truly is. And that's why, I was so happy that we connected and that you were able to even come here, because I feel like so many people need hope, especially, who are trapped in the disease, and they feel powerless and they feel like they'll never get out of it. And I think stories like yours, especially for men out there who may be suffering and feel any shame regarding getting help, I think it's just inspiring and very powerful.
Well, thank you.
And I really thank you for being here. And I definitely want to have you back on the talk, because I feel like there's so many different things to cover, regarding eating disorders and everything. So I really thank you.